and it's a very interesting read. And there are certain chapters which is absolutely missed there, and if you compare with other trade arrangements, so that's why it is not deep enough. So at this stage, let me call upon Professor Gauragovindo Goswami, is a professor at the Department of Economics, School of Business and Economics at the North-South University. Professor Goswami has done his PhD in economics from United States, from Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And he has been pro-VC, acting pro-VC, acting VC, and held a number of very important positions in universities, and also has been a prolific writer and researcher. So, Professor Goswami, we would like to sort of you to give us an overall picture of Bangladesh economy, in terms of trade, business, and investment, where we stand. I know it's a big topic, but give us a bird's eye view, especially looking at markers in our trade and business behavior, and see where possibly we have not been performing well. And so, as we discussed, we would like you to set the scene within the bigger context of the economy. Over to you, sir.
Professor Gaur, you need to unmute yourself. Professor Gaur, you need to unmute yourself.
Professor Gaurav,
okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction, distinguished panelists and organizers, Dean and Director of SIPG. I would like to thank all of you. This is a very special day, even though we are organizing this webinar, but the last span of Padma Bridge is being connected, and this is a history for Bangladesh. And I think with this, Bangladesh has created a history of hope and aspiration in the global arena. And RCEP has also created a lot of opportunities and challenges for Bangladesh. So let me say a few words about Bangladesh, how it looks like. Bangladesh is a special kind of newly independent country approaching towards the completion of 50 years of independence. And it is a very vital, growing, emerging market economy in South Asia, and having a size of, according to PPP, $869 billion and 30th largest economy. But per capita income wise, its position is slightly low. So I don't want to go into that. And what are the main trading channel of Bangladesh? Bangladesh is basically, it's an export-import constitutes in total 38% of our GDP. And the investment, that means fixed capital formation as percent of GDP is 30%, around 30%. And it is basically earning its living through two channels. One is export, dominated by ready-made garments, and the other one is remittance. So this is the main strength of Bangladesh in the global arena. And I think the importance of Bangladesh is approaching towards the fulfillment of middle income requirements. Economy, but economy is very resilient and it is growing nicely, and all the major economic indicators are picking up. Now the main thing is what are the channels that is being created with RCEP and other countries in the world. We are traditionally linked up with Western countries, mostly in trading channel, exporting channel. And in importing channels, RCEP is more dominant, or it will be playing more role in Bangladesh. Now in FDI channel is not very strong in terms of net so this channel has not been explored that far yet, and our South Asian entity is very dominant because we are having SAFTA and SAARC dominance, and I think in terms of Asia Pacific, we have some arrangement with Asia Pacific country also, and having some trade liberalization facilities in that channel. And regarding partnership, I think if you consider, if we consider the remittance channel, Middle Eastern and other countries are dominant, but uh, 2020 may not be considered as a very um, potential channel of our growth. But if I consider the dynamic context, so that means through investment channel, we have some investment partnership with it. And even though the immigration type, because in RCEP, if we consider RCEP's documents, I had the chance to read some of them only, very well documented. And I think some immigration liberalization will be there, but we are not quite sure how much of those liberalization will help us. But the fact is that RCEP is dominated by China. Invested projects are having very productive role in Bangladesh. But the fact is that Bangladesh is culturally South Asian, and RCEP is culturally slightly different from Bangladesh. But for trade and business relationship, those things are not very important. Important thing is it is not a static relationship. It is always dynamic. We have to be very practical. Another issue is if we consider our position geographically, where is our location? Our location, in one side we have RCEP countries, in another side we have India. So basically we are bordering SAARC and RCEP. And benefits and concessions that they are currently gaining. So in that context, we have to explore alternative. So I would like to just conclude by saying the role of Thailand. What Thailand did? Thailand is a very vital member of ASEAN, but they are also linked up with ASEAN 3, ASEAN 7, and as well as they are having dozens of bilateral agreements with many countries, and they are reaping all the benefits. So we are not quite clear what will be the next course of action in maintaining global order, whether it will be a totally China dominated or China versus RCEP. So there it is not just
Thank
if
you.
we have a relationship with RCEP, then we cannot have relationship with SAFTA. This is not true, because RCEP is a
Thank you,
discriminatory.
Professor Goswami.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. We will come back to you, and we wish this to be a more interactive. So the short interventions are always encouraged, so that every speaker gets a little longer space in terms of statement. So we deeply appreciate your setting the scene. Profile of Bangladesh just came out this month, a week back, still not published. And looking at the what it did, actually looked at Bangladesh's economy in the context of 3 LDC graduation indicators, and it's really encouraging and kind of a happy experience to read it, saying that Bangladesh has really done exceptionally well, even in the difficult days. So you're absolutely right that we are on the right direction. Also, in terms of your export and import, we are more looked at Western countries. Long term, and especially I see in the investment areas, we will feel possibly its impact, and other colleagues will come back and talk about it. At this stage, may I call upon Dr. Selim Raihan, the professor of Department of Economics of Dhaka University. Professor Raihan has done his PhD from University of Manchester, UK, and subsequently done degrees at the Harvard University. And he has been writing, and also he heads what you call the South Asian Network on Economic. Professor Raihan, could we sort of get a feel of various aspects and elements of RCEP, since you have been following it from almost its negotiating state? Yeah, I know it's a 500-page document, but just maybe 5 to 6 pointers. Over to you, Professor Raihan.
Thank you, Ambassador Shahidul Haq, and I must thank the organizers for inviting me to this very important event. I just want to respond first to that very important point which was raised earlier about the choice of Bangladesh, whether there was an option for Bangladesh to join RCEP. In my view, actually, there was no option. From now on, seriously, how we'll actually handle these mega trading block issues or different other regional trading issues. But on that point, I would also like to highlight the point that Bangladesh so far has not been very successful in actually pursuing any regional trading arrangement or any regional trading bilateral arrangement so far very successfully. If we look at the RCEP, we all know that India was there from the very beginning, but then India pulled out from RCEP last year, November last year. And now it is now ASEAN 10 countries plus 5 countries with whom ASEAN had FTAs. So despite simply trade in free trade in goods, and I'll come back to that point, and to bring in all kinds of issues which have not been very successfully discussed even at the WTO level. I know that Tawfiq is here from WTO and he will talk about it, but we all know that about the deadlock in WTO, but many things which have not been very successfully negotiated at the WTO, RCEP is trying to actually pull these things together. So now if you look at what are the key features of the RCEP, as I said that it is actually, it's actually going beyond that ASEAN plus one FTS. So it's in terms of coverage. We can talk about the depth of what Ambassador Shahidul he actually writes. WTO negotiation, or it will create some pressure on WTO negotiation. In my view, it is going to put some pressure on the negotiation of the WTO, because the way it has been successful in making this agreement in place, I think that will definitely create pressure on the other members of the WTO. Now, the second point is that what I think that this RCEP is actually going to create a very strong regional value chain in among the ASEAN plus those 5 countries, which were already been there. We all knew that these ASEAN countries, they actually developed regional value chain, and China was a big factor also integrating China. But this RCEP is going to make these noise. China has offered duty-free market access to Bangladesh, and also some of the other RCEP countries, they provide some GSP facilities. So that is going to be affected because of this RCEP, and if that the regional value chain gets stronger in the coming days. Another point which is there, that this RCEP negotiation, and they have very strongly mentioned, and that is there in the document, it is going to have very strong special and differential treatment, and lots of flexibility for the countries which are relatively less developed. Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, these 4 countries. And these 4 countries, at least we know that to Bangladesh in terms of losing some competitiveness, because the RCEP members, especially these 4 countries and the countries in the ASEAN, some of the ASEAN countries who are also competitors of Bangladesh, they will be able to procure raw materials at a very low price now because of this trading arrangement. Whereas many of the producers in Bangladesh, when it comes to diversification of our export basket, they will still face the challenges, because on many of the products, we still have very high tariffs. So I think this is an area for discussion. I'm just putting this topic on the table. Also, there is another concern, is that it respect to what I call the FDI diversion. These 4 countries, what I've already mentioned, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, they are actually the RCEP is very comprehensive. If you look at the trade in goods, it's including the rules of origin, customs procedure and trade facilitation, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, standards, technical regulations, conformity assessment, and trade remedies. So all these things, there are 20 chapters actually in the RCEP agreement, and the trade in goods cover all these issues. My big concern is that the RCEP actually may create some pressure on raising the standards, and or even not even not the raising the standards, but also enforcing the standards. So that will also create some pressure on Bangladesh. And I'm quite sure the Bangladesh business community, they are very much aware of it. And among the ASEAN countries too, but that will actually have more, we'll see more of these things in the future. In that case, will there be any implication of our labor export to Malaysia, Singapore, and so I think this is something probably we need to think about it. And very finally, there are chapters on investment, intellectual property rights, e-commerce, competition, SMEs, economic and technical cooperation, government procurement, legal and institutional areas, including dispute settlement. My only comment here is that, as I already mentioned, I'll just stop by saying that, that looking at the investment and as I mentioned earlier, that the risk of FDI diversion will be there in the RCEP. So we have more added works, homeworks need to be done. And with the RCEP has actually added a lot of works for us to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Raihan, for sharing with us in a short span, rather 500 plus pages of documents, and you have brought out very important issues, and I'll just point all of our colleagues towards one more, which is recognition of each other's degrees and certificates. That continue to remain a big thorny issue between and among the ASEAN and the Asian and the South Asian. Production and distribution. So the capacity building in this, and good to see that a agreement which in the preamble focuses on the less advanced countries within the members, and especially LDCs. It's mentioned by name. So that's where I think even if we continue to not remain in LDC for 2024, but it will have an impact on us. Especially, I'll just name one country, Vietnam. In fact, Vietnam is just, I think, crossing in every parameters in Bangladesh in terms of investment, business, and all. In fact, if we get 2 billion, they get 12 billion already. So it will be 112 billion. And some of the statistics that we have also put it into the area, which is called technology. In fact, I was looking at the agreement, and there are two chapters, which, in a very simplistic way, it looks at the whole evolving technological world, the virtual world. The chapter 12, which talks about electronic commerce, and chapter 16, which talked about economic and technical cooperation. So they have taken that into consideration in terms of building a little bit of a governance as to how they should sort of interact with this technology in terms of business, and then look forward to this. And we have someone who I'm told that has a huge in politics, philosophy, and economics. Quite an exciting combination. And he has also been involved in Bangladesh's capital market, and a prolific speaker. Sir, we would like to hear from you. Where are we in terms of technology innovations, both in terms of creating it, managing it, and governing it? And the technological governance era that we are faced with, are we prepared to do trade in technology? In specific question, and where the RCEP would come handy for those countries leaving us behind. Over to you, sir.
This panel, and then I'll address technology. Firstly, let's think about globalization and what's happening with globalization. Let's think about COVID and what this COVID crisis means for the global economy and trade within that. And the third thing is, let's think about where Bangladesh is now and where it wants to be. And then I think we can discuss the impact of RCEP on technology. On these 3 points, firstly, I think in terms of globalization, we've seen during the Trump administration, globalization has been moving backwards. There's a very well documented U.S.-China ongoing trade dispute. So I think that RCEP firstly is likely to, let's say, kickstart a renewed process of globalization, but maybe regional. Changes, particularly the acceleration of digitization and the importance of technology. So I think that if Bangladesh needed to focus on technology, the technology sector before COVID, it has to focus on technology more after COVID. On the third issue, and then I'll talk specifically about technology and supply chains, where is Bangladesh today and where does it need to be with respect to trade? Well, I think firstly, I think there's one very simple and critical word: diversification. So firstly, Bangladesh needs to diversify away from garments. RMG is more than 80% of trade, as we all know. And secondly, Bangladesh needs to diversify away from, I'd say, by geography. Specific area that you asked me to address. In terms of where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, I think Bangladesh wants to move away from being primarily a very extremely successful, the second largest exporter of RMG, but very low margin RMG products in an increasingly competitive space. In a decade wants to be more like Vietnam, or maybe even as successful, even more successful than Vietnam, which is an exporter of higher margin, value-added manufactured technology products. If we talk about 100 economic zones or 28 plus technology parks, that I think is one of the most important policy initiatives from the government here. I think that we have to understand that so I think I won't go on for too long in the interest of time. I think I've already taken up 4 minutes, but some food for thought for the panel members and maybe some Q&A later on. We need to understand that RCEP is going to have a profound impact on regional and global supply chains. And if Bangladesh wants to be a technology manufacturing hub in the region, a re-export hub in the region, then it needs to be able to integrate the supply chains, it needs to have the right tariff structure to integrate supply chains. The last observation, and then I'll finish, is actually in terms of our focus. Bangladesh needs to be able to seek new opportunities in this massive new I think similarly for India as well, the fact that we have a large trade imbalance with China, that we have $11, $12 billion trade imbalance with China, and India has a $60 billion trade imbalance with China, I think to look at that and say that's the reason we should stay away from RCEP and FTAs, to me, is exactly the wrong logic as a macroeconomist. Because we have such a large, we already are clearly uncompetitive versus China. Now the question is, how can we become more competitive, and how can we find new export opportunities in China, in other parts of ASEAN? So I think Bangladesh, I've always thought that Bangladesh it would be more economic value for Bangladesh to be a member of ASEAN rather than SAFTA. But I think that Bangladesh, the government of Bangladesh needs to engage seriously in how best to join our Bangladesh to join, and we have to join on terms that make sense for us. So with that, let me finish and hand it back to the moderator.
Thank you very much indeed for bringing in something unique to the table. We will come back to you, especially on the issue of, you have rightly pointed out that, we have perks, we have technologies, and then what we do with it. In order to do business with it, we have to be linked with the global supply chain. Now, the question is, I would like from you when we come back, that what in terms of 3 things that you want us to do, or government wants to do, to be able to do that, not only having the park, which is the we have to keep in mind that this is the first time China is into a plurilateral arrangements, except the WTO, leaving the WTO behind. So we will also see how China, as an emerging power, behaves in a trading system, because they have 51% of the GDP of the RCEP. So that's something also open in the floor, and we know it's, and you have rightly pointed out that it's not only business, but it's also geopolitics. So on both fronts, I think Bangladesh should very critically look at the RCEP and see within a much broader and longer vision, rather than saying, during my lifetime, anyway, we all are dead in long run. So let's not go into another kind of a big exercise. But you have rightly a researcher at the Hansard Society Research School in the LSE. He is one of those whom I used to depend a lot during my foreign secretaryship in terms of bringing new ideas, reviewing things. Although when he was much junior officer, now he has gone through the ladder and the director general. I have a huge respect for his academic vigor. He has also served in Washington and SARC Secretariat, so he has a much better regional view. So Javed, we would like to hear from you as to how you see the ASEAN Bangladesh business. You know,
Uh,
instead of going into Asia, leaving out the two big economies. So where we stand, and in that perspective, what you look at RCEP?
we know Ambassador Shahidul Islam sir stands rightly between the academia and the policy circle. It's always fascinating to have an opportunity to interact. RCEP has some admirable features, as some of the scholars have already pointed out. And I lately had been working with Dr. Selim Rehan in some aspects at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is a modern, comprehensive, and mutually beneficial trading pact. This is now the world's largest trading pact. It is modern in the sense that it covers almost all the all that. And of course, from my standpoint as the official representative, the Southeast Asia wing of the ministry, I will be trying to touch upon the stake of Bangladesh and the Southeast Asian perspective. And another aspect to bring it here is a little bit of, it's not a footnote, it can be an important note, is that its comparison with the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and the Progressive Trade and Comprehensive the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. You know, President Biden was a senior member of the Obama administration, and the TPP was basically a brainchild of the Obama administration. US fold. And in here, we as such don't see a drastic and major economic shock for Bangladesh. Of course, Bangladesh will be feeling a little bit like an outsider, despite being strategically located between South Asia and Southeast Asia. Bangladesh was not, of course, invited to the process when the negotiation started 8 years ago, because it was a negotiation between basically the 10 ASEAN member countries and the 5 dialogue partners. India was also in there initially, but India ultimately opted out of that. Because, you know, business at the end of the day, we don't think, though it may be a little bit of my personal view, is not all about tariff. major shock. It was not a major shock in that, and Bangladesh showed the maturity that it is not about tariff, and tariff is selectivity, and historically Bangladesh not always had been at the right end of such selectivity. Bangladesh was at the wrong end in many respects of such selectivity in global political economy, and Bangladesh has shown that it has the potential, and it has, if there are the right conditions in the RMG trade particularly, it has defeated a lot of countries that are the producers of even the world-class cotton. Bangladesh doesn't have all these endowments, but Bangladesh has attained its stature as a trading partner in the global RMG trade. But of course, there is another aspect to that. Our export to the ASEAN countries is basically less than 2%. And if you do a little bit of analysis, is that this is basically import dominated. We import around $9 billion from the ASEAN countries. And if you bring China and Japan into the calculus, the 5 dialogue partner countries which are partner of the RCEP, then of course there is the huge import bill in there. But as far as the ASEAN countries are concerned, we import predominantly from them and we export very little to them. And in the import structure, it is basically the raw materials that we import from them. So if in the RCEP scenario, there is a very cost effective process in because of the RCEP. So as a net importer of raw materials, we can stand to benefit rather to some extent in the process. So we do not have to be absolutely cynical in that. Of course, we will be restarting our negotiation, and we will be waiting for our call. In the diplomatic circle, we are of course proactive. We have lately made our mooted our idea to be a regional, to be a sectoral dialogue partner of ASEAN. We are very proactive in that, and hopefully we will have a call from the ASEAN process. So it is not at all a cynical overture in all respects. But we don't have reasons to be, as government officials, absolutely complacent. Firstly, as you have seen, there can be an intra-RCEP and extra-RCEP investments boosting up. And Bangladesh, as a competitor country, may see that countries such as Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Malaysia, they can thrive, and they can thrive even at the expense of Bangladesh. And from Bangladesh's point of view, our some frontline industries such as the IT industry, heavy industry, infrastructure, telecommunication, that traditionally relies on foreign direct investment, massive inflow of foreign direct investment, that may have a jolt to some extent, unless we have the right condition in there. And it is not at all a happy coincidence for us in that some of the RCEP LDC countries, as Ambassador Shahidul Haq sir has pointed out at the onset of his deliberations, that the terminology LDC is in there, and countries such as Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, they will be gaining access to the larger regional markets such as Australia, China, Japan, at a time when Bangladesh will be seeing erosion, as Professor Selim Rahan has pointed out. There will be an erosion of Bangladesh's preference. And Bangladesh may a little bit feel an outsider in that, and it is a good point for us to be feeling uncomfortable. So we need to re-strategize for our market access to the big RCEP markets such as Australia, Korea, Japan, and China. And the 2018 study that Professor Selim Rahan did an GTAP analysis. And of course, it showed that there are some positive gains for the RCEP members in terms of real GDP, in terms of real GDP gain, percentage of real GDP gain, and there are some negative gains for countries such as Bangladesh, Nepal. Bangladesh will be suffering. It was a modeling done by Professor Selim Rahan in 2018, and I don't know what findings he will have around this time. And another aspect to it is the labor intensive industries of the relatively prosperous RCEP countries. This can shift to the relatively less prosperous countries, and in that case it will be a challenge for us to claim our stake in the process, because of course we are targeting our export volume to take to $60 billion. $60 billion. And in that respect, we have to count a lot on overseas investment. So in that case, we have to re-strategize, and we have to have the right conditions in our place. And for that, I think that we need to initiate discussion with the ASEAN for ASEAN +1 FTA. That will be probably my ending point, because there are other discussions after me, and I may come back after that if there is any
Thank you.
particular to know that. So, sir, ASEAN
Thank you.
+1 FTA. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
We'll come back to you. No,
Thank
thank you, Javed, for bringing out the whole center of the debate, that is FTA only tariff business or not, because we are prone to looking at FTA from a absolutely tariff angle only, and we don't see the bigger picture. Possibly we are also don't see that there are third, fourth generation of FTA now functioning globally. We have about 300 of those globally, and not essentially those are tariff based. That's why it is a partnership. It's an economic partnership, much larger and bigger than tariff. So that's a nice angle. We know, we take your point that it will not fall on our head today, but that's how normally problem starts, especially when you have larger competitors in that group. So we need to start revisiting on the whole issue of ASEAN Bangladesh. As you know, that we have been trying for 10 years, including our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has raised it with all the ASEAN heads, whomever she had met about the membership. They have a moratorium. I don't know when ASEAN will open up, even in a small window for Bangladesh. And given the presence of Indonesia and Myanmar, I doubt that it will happen soon. So in the absence of that, possibly we should look at RCEP, because of our good friend China is an overwhelming player in that. So that we could look at. But we'll come back to you. At the stage, we have with us Barrister Nihat Kabir. Barrister Nihat Kabir is the president of Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She is a very well-known business personality in Bangladesh, a lawyer and an educator, if I may so Dr. Barrister Nihat Kabir, and she has been a very active member in the policy circle of Bangladesh, both from the business point of view, but also from having a very legal mind and a brain. Madam, we would like to sort of hear from you how, say, business community is looking at RCEP, just initial concern or no concern, and FTA in general. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Master Shazanhak, and I must thank NSU for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you all. Before sort of directly going into answering the questions, I'm going to lay out a few points which would appear to be very obvious, but you will see why I'm doing that when I talk. I want to give you 5 or 6 points as to why Bangladesh should be a preferred trade destination and a manufacturing destination for investment, for foreign investment. Let me start there. Bangladesh has a proven record of being able to build global scale manufacturing with quality and in line with global compliance standards and still be price competitive. RMG goes without saying. We have pharmaceutical, ceramics, light engineering, leather, and several other such industries. Our industry is nimble and agile. We are very good at overcoming resource constraints. We are a resource constrained country, and even so, we have done quite well. As a young, fairly young country, providing for a very large population. We don't have heavy legacy technology issues. So, from the first industrial revolution, we can happily jump into the fourth or the fifth without missing a beat, if necessary. We offer duty and quota-free access to more than 3 billion people in the world. We have superb geographical and demographic advantages, which we all know about. It potentially gives us access to the global market, as well as giving investors immediate access to 170 million strong domestic market, of whom at least I would say 20 to 30 million have significant disposable income at the moment. We have a young workforce, which is highly trainable. And we don't, as I've mentioned, we don't have the burden of legacy technology. So our young people can adapt to new technology very fast. These are a rare combination. And let me give you some examples. As you know, Master Haq, you've mentioned, I'm a commercial lawyer. I've been a commercial lawyer for 30 years now, and have regular interactions with domestic and foreign investors. Let me give you some examples where foreign investors have their best operating units in Bangladesh. Coates Bangladesh has one of its top 5 factories in the world in Bangladesh, with more, and they have more than 140 factories worldwide. British American Tobacco Bangladesh, I know we have difficulties with tobacco industry, but it is a role model in that industry, and it has one of the highest productivities in the world. It is sending production staff to Poland and other countries to train other BAT staff. Let me name a few other companies: Unilever, Standard Chartered Bank, Citi, NA, HSBC, Nestle, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, General Electric, Western Hotel Chain. All of them have some of the highest earning units here. Marico Bangladesh, one of the highest returns on investment in the world for them comes from Bangladesh. We have several billion-dollar conglomerates domestically. We have Square, we have Pran, we have quite a few others there. Bikash has grown to be the largest MFI in the world in much shorter time than Kenya's M-Pesa, which was the groundbreaker. It has a valuation close to $2 billion already. Many foreign investors have invested in Bikash. Given all this, why is it? I mean, it is always a question that where do we fall behind in attracting foreign investment? Why is it that there is this disconnect between what we can, in theory, provide, what we in practice do provide, and what is the perception overseas about Bangladesh? Now, the reason I'm saying this is that if you look at this RCEP, which is ASEAN +5, and you've said that for the last 10 years, we've been trying to become a member of ASEAN, we are not a member of any really effective regional or even bilateral trade agreements. What holds us back? What holds us back, in my humble opinion, is our reticence in opening up our economy. We are not yet used to feeling that we are actually quite a strong economy. We still think that we are somewhere back. We are not very, we say it, we talk about it, we're proud of our achievements, but when it actually comes to walking the talk, we are very risk averse. We think that if we enter into any of these agreements, we will lose protection. Our NBR is afraid that it is going to lose in the short term revenue stream from tariffs. And this has been going on. We had a meeting with former colleagues of yours, Master Haq. The foreign ministry had organized this meeting with many of the ambassadors who work in the ASEAN, who are delegated to the ASEAN countries. And it came out that while we say that, oh, it takes a long time to enter into these FTAs and all, what stops us is ourselves. What stops us is our perceived, how to put it? We are scared that we are going to lose a certain thing in the short term. We do not look forward and see that, okay, maybe for 2 or 3 years we will suffer some losses, but going forward, we are going to gain much, much more. Now, this ASEAN +5, this RCEP, as I think Professor Govindu mentioned, it includes Japan and Korea, two countries with whom we have large relationships, and certainly with Japan, we have extensive relationships in the trade and industry front. China has become a part of RCEP, and once RCEP gets going, how are we going to be affected? We have always had ambitions to be the one in the China +1 investment strategies or investment decisions of Europe, European and American corporates and industry. Is that going to be there? If the other countries of ASEAN can provide a better, a more seamless facility to China to deal with China, are we, or to, even though moving away the industry from China, but still keeping the supply chains more or less intact, are we going to fall by the wayside? That is certainly a matter of concern to business in Bangladesh. Another few matters of concern are that, you know, there are obvious value chain linkages between ASEAN members for a wide range of industries. I'll give you an example. I suppose Myanmar exports crude oil to Singapore and imports back refined petroleum products from there. There are already many such linkages. We will simply, again, not be able to tap into the benefits of these. ASEAN alone has 622 million consumers, which are increasingly affluent, young, dynamic, and add to that Korea, Japan, China, and the other two countries. How are we going to extend our business presence in those countries in the absence of agreements with them? So I think, you know, we can dissect this agreement and all, but at the end of the day, we need to take the bold steps necessary to become a part of these regional and international trade regimes. Otherwise, we will stay where we are. Thank you. Thank
you very much, Barrister Nihat Kabir. We have to take a bold step that I take from you. Thank you for portraying a very vivid, dynamic, young, entrepreneurial, promising Bangladesh, but at the end, also identifying some of the obstacles that we're likely to face because of our late response to development that's happening around us. I just as an information, I would like to share with you that the Confederation of Indian Industry has come out very strongly against India's decision to opt out of the RCEP. And they think this has been a very wrong decision, guided not by economic rationale, but by political imperatives. So they are still pushing. And as you know, that RCEP document itself had kept a provision since India was in the negotiations right from the day one till the end. So they have kept a provision that India can jump in anytime they want without going through any further formalities or negotiations. And as you know that in the accession clause, after the RCEP comes into force, which is likely to be the middle of the next year or early next year, any country, any party, any country, any territory, it has kept it quite broad, can apply to join RCEP, but they will only be accepted with the full consensus of the 15 members. So there is a hurdle for Bangladesh, which the Foreign Office and others should start looking at it. So thank you very much. And I take your point that what's that holding us back from joining groups and others, because we have never pursued an isolationist approach or a typical protectionist approach, and we can protect the industry without being protectionist. That came out very clearly in your statement. Thank you very much. At this stage, we have Mr. Farooq Ahmed, who is the Secretary General of Bangladesh Employers Federation, a long-time actor in the field of industries, labor issue, human rights. We have shared a lot of negotiations together in Brussels, in Geneva, and other places. A very dynamic, very progressive, forward-looking business person, and we always find something new from him. Sir, could you just share with us where are we currently in terms of labor and human rights issues, and we see that this is an RCEP is a document where these two chapters are absent. If you compare with the CPTPP and others, so that's a big advantage for Bangladesh to be in the RCEP because the whole issue is not there. Whereas we have 90% of trade with the world and community where these things comes strongly. Before I give the floor to you, sir, I also want to recognize the presence of our Honorable Chair, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Atiqul Islam amongst us. Welcome, sir. Over to Mr. Farouk.
Thank you. Thank you, Shohid Bhai. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me to join this very important webinar as one of the panelists. I must mention that Ambassador Shohidul Haq, and also I should mention Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah. These two gentlemen had been a real mentor to us, particularly to the business community, while negotiating the trade deals, and along with, as Ambassador Shohid mentioned, the labor and other issues where Bangladesh has been facing a very complex situation. Sir, we miss you. Of course, you are there, and definitely we will resort to your help whenever necessary. My brief deliberation will consist in three parts. Of course, I'll try to remain very short and precise. Number one, the labor issues in trade agreements in general. Number two, labor standards and workers' rights with regards to Bangladesh. And finally, labor issues from RCEP perspective, though it's not there. The inclusion of labor provisions and workers' rights has been significantly increased in trade agreements in recent years. It's a public rhetoric from politicians to trade officials that labor provisions are vital to ensure properly addressing of the social dimensions of globalization. Policymakers and social activists have used the presence of strong labor provisions in trade agreements to argue that the social consequences of trade commitments are taken seriously. Labor provisions will also address one of the significant challenges of the current free market economy, that is, challenge of the inequality in almost all the countries in the world. Though labor issues are not new to connect with trade issues, however, WTO multilateral trade agreements have not encouraged inclusion of labor clauses in the trade agreements. The regional and bilateral trade agreements have included labor clauses in many cases, though there were several attempts in different times to include labor issues in the WTO provisions, even since during the GATT time. Nonetheless, it was 1996 WTO ministerial in Singapore, the first ministerial, the issue was discussed that ILO would be the globally accepted forum to deal with labor standards and workers' rights issues, which was finally recognized during the Hong Kong conference in 2005. The number of FTAs negotiated in recent years bilaterally and regionally that include labor provisions have expanded enormously. While there were only 3 agreements with labor provisions since 1995, this has increased to 77 by 2016 and perhaps over 100, I do not have the updated data, by 2020. The United States and the European Union, along with Canada, Australia, has been particularly active in concluding trade agreements that incorporate labor standards in recent years. But they are not alone, and the presence of labor provisions in trade agreements is increasingly becoming a global phenomenon. As of 2019, some reports mentioned that over 180 countries had at least one trade agreement that included labor provisions. Any trade agreement have serious political considerations, of course, not only confined to economic or trade issues. To my understanding, labor provisions are included in trade agreement to exercise extra influence by the stronger party over the weaker party and to regulate their terms and conditions during the implementation of the trade agreement. After all, any trade agreement between 2 or more countries is not only a trade or economic issue, it's rather more of a political issue. Trade and politics are 2 sides of the same pages, and these are inseparable. As of now, United States have signed 20 free trade agreements, 62 TIFA, of course with Bangladesh it is TICFA, and 42 bilateral investment treaties. Majority of them have labor clauses with a term used these days known as social clause, which includes labor standards, workers' rights, elimination of child labor, forced labor, environmental standards, and very recently, concerns have also been raised on the business and human rights issues, particularly after the declaration of UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights by the United Nations in 2011 and unanimously endorsed by all the member states. On the other hand, European Union has signed total, as of now, 78 different types of trade agreements in last 2 decades, where labor standards are very vividly mentioned in those agreements, including environmental clauses. All these agreements involve the parties making commitments in relation to ILO core standards, that is freedom of association and collective bargaining, the elimination of forced and child labor, elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. European Union has its own monitoring system in addition to extensively using ILO supervisory mechanism to monitor the implementation of labor standards in different countries, especially in trade transaction with European Union under EBA. US is also bringing out regular reports on labor and human rights. Coming down to specifically Bangladesh issue, Bangladesh came into global spotlight, especially on labor standards and workers' rights issues after the tragic incident of Rana Plaza in April 2013. All global watchdogs, including global worker federations and global NGOs, raised their serious concerns and strong voice against Bangladesh's labor standards and workers' rights. Currently, as of now, which even Ambassador Shahidul Haq also dealt, the Bangladesh is under extreme scrutiny of the European Union and ILO. There are total 11 major observations of the European Union, starting from ratification of ILO's Fundamental Convention, Convention 138, Convention of Minimum Age, ratification of Forced Labor Protocol, and up to elimination of child labor of all form by 2025 and worst form by 2021. I didn't go into the details because of the paucity of time. Similarly, ILO supervisory mechanism is also strongly focusing on Bangladesh. They have 3 instruments: Committee on Freedom of Association, Committee on Application of Standards, and Committee of Experts. Since Bangladesh is a member signatory country of ILO, so Bangladesh remains under extreme scrutiny and vigilance of the ILO supervisory mechanism under 4 main areas: social dialogue, social protection, elimination of forced and child labor, and non-discrimination. Besides, occupational health and safety issues are also being discussed as one of the fundamental principles which will be accepted soon. And this issue has come up particularly after the Rana Plaza incident. ILO and the European Union work hand in hand in monitoring the labor standards. Bangladesh is also facing serious observations in the ILO supervisory system. It is extremely difficult to maintain appropriate kind of labor standards due to many external and internal factors. Huge informality is one of the major bottlenecks for maintaining proper labor standards, in addition to other influences, including narrow interests of the worker leaders and management. Lack of skills of mid-level managers is one of the prime factors for not being able to set a benchmark in the field of labor standards, for which Bangladeshi entrepreneurs prefer to employ foreign managers. Now, coming down to the RCEP perspective. Fortunately or unfortunately, RCEP does not have any social clause. It means the issue of labor standards is officially out of purview of RCEP. Though the copy of agreement has not yet been shared in public to that extent, but then it will be in the public domain after ratification by 6 ASEAN countries and 3 observer countries. Concerns have been expressed by some quarters that Australia and New Zealand both are concerned, and they are very much concerned about labor and environmental standards, and they are also member of RCEP. Therefore, it will be a compromise on their part. The commentators are saying like that. However, with Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, this will be beneficial not to have any labor clause in the agreement. China is also assumed to be a big supporter of not to have any social clause. In addition, the whole political rationale of RCEP perhaps allows us to understand that social clauses are not important factor here. Therefore, it is needless to mention that it will benefit many member countries of RCEP. Now, regarding Bangladesh's strategic interest on joining RCEP, which have already been mentioned by our esteemed speakers already, that it is extremely important for us to join as early as possible. And I am more than sure that Bangladesh will also be benefited. There might be some extra pressure at the initial stages, but however, we got to manage those pressures and move forward, reaping benefits out of this biggest trade bloc that is coming up in the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Farooq, for sharing with us the history of social clause in trade. And I take your point very strongly that trade and politics is inseparable. It's a great realization over the years. I think we have to often people think that those who deal with politics or geopolitics, they bring in everything in that, but we know, and you know, that doing business is also a geopolitical questions and huge power politics. As you rightly pointed out, the big powers often try to put pressure on the smaller powers. And thank you very much. And also I would like to flag that European Union has lifted now. They are not only happy with the labor issue and rights issues, they are saying that whole UPR, Universal Periodic Reviews recommendation, which is about 200 of those, all has to be looked at before Bangladesh GSP Plus is awarded. So good luck with the future negotiation with the Western world in terms of it. So in that context, I think RCEP is a very good alternative model for Bangladesh, and Bangladesh should seriously look at it. At this stage, I bring in Mr. Taufikur Rahman, who is at the WTO. He heads the LDC wing, and the global LDC wing of WTO. And he has been dealing with trade, I don't know, maybe 25 years, and a very dear colleague of ours. He has done masters from Dhaka University and has been prolific in terms of policy thinking. So, sir, we would like to hear from you. What's happening in the WTO? You know, we hear a lot of things from so far, and how WTO is looking at FTA in general. There are 300 of them to monitor, I'm told. But what do you think about RCEP in terms of WTO? Is it filling in some gap in the multilateral trading system, or actually not, without United States being in? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's indeed a privilege to be part of this distinguished gathering, and I will take off my WTO hat so that I can talk more freely, and I'll also talk in my personal capacity, but I don't think I'll be able to do justice to the introduction that you have given, sir, but I very much still part of the Foreign Ministry, and I'm very happy to be here today, and it's a very important webinar. I'll come back to the two questions that you have posed, whether what's happening in WTO and how do we look at this development of RCEP. A lot of ground has already been covered, and it's very difficult to add the value at this stage. But let me say a few things. We are 164 members in the WTO, and several times speakers have said more than 300 RTAs have been notified that are in force. And point to note, each WTO member is party to at least one RTA. And this ASEAN region is also very prolific in terms of their engagement with RTAs, because 191 RTAs notified to the WTO involve at least one RCEP country. Now, the second point, and this is also something has been raised before about the, and you have also kindly commented on it, that it's big, but it's not deep. And that's why we have to look at and critically review the agreement or the arrangement, because sometimes it's also an illusion that how, to what extent free trade agreements are free. It is definitely a blueprint for substantive liberalization, but then I refrain from saying complete liberalization, because it still excludes sensitive sectors. And in my experience in WTO negotiations, and one of the ambassadors in the RCEP region has said that if you think that Japan is going to agree to agriculture negotiations or to cover certain sensitive items that are excluded from multilateral framework, then you will think that we have achieved real breakthroughs in negotiations. So even if we look at RCEP, some liberalization will take 25 years. In some cases, it's 36 years. You said, sir, in the long run, we are all dead. So we will have to see how the dynamics will evolve. But it still excludes sectors which are not included in the liberalization scheme of RCEP. The third point, and again, this is also for Bangladesh kind of implications, and some of the speakers have already covered it, that yes, this is not necessarily a free trade agreement. These are basically part of regional deep economic integration efforts. Some part of it is tariff liberalization, some measures are for regulatory convergence, and some measures are like business confidence measures, which these economies are trying to facilitate trade and goods and services. Now here, the two defining features of RCEP is that it brings in Japan, China, and Korea into the bigger ASEAN FTA network. ASEAN countries have already been trading with the non-ASEAN parties with individual bilateral free trade agreements. But this is something that RCEP has brought some kind of a new FTA framework for Japan and China and Japan and Korea. So they see some gains, and obviously there are some industry interests there. China's chemical industry, Japan's auto industry, and Korea's steel industry. So these industries are going to mutually benefit from this arrangement. And then another defining feature of RCEP is that it harmonizes the rules of origin criteria across RCEP countries. Definitely this regional value chain, it is a big boost for this consideration. And it is a single consolidated rule book for all these 15 countries to do trade with tariff liberalization and rules of origin. So these are the features, and it is in this context we have to look at RCEP. Now, when it comes to WTO and how do we see the development of RCEP in WTO's prism, I think it is, and everybody knows that the RTAs and the multilateral system has always coexisted, and WTO rules do allow creation of RTAs. But at the same time, RTAs are exceptions to the most favored nation principle, which we call in WTO MFN. So these are exceptions to the MFN principle. But of course, if exceptions take the center stage, then it becomes a problem. But when at the multilateral front, you do not have negotiations progressing, this type of regional integration efforts will increase. And early 90s, regional trade agreements were considered to be the building blocks. But then since the mid 90s, some economists were thinking that whether these are building blocks or whether these are stumbling blocks. But whichever way we view these developments, RTAs are going to stay, because these are not necessarily trade expansion considerations that our governments are thinking, but these are for strategic partnerships, and as you said, sir, to the pursuit of deep regional integration. There's one thing that I have to highlight because in the context of WTO, we do welcome this type of initiatives because both RTAs and WTO, we have a common mission of trade liberalization. But what we do in the WTO is that we are trying to set the maximum limits by trying to reduce what we call in the WTO is bound tariffs. But what is happening in RTAs or FTAs is countries are bringing down tariffs at their applied level. So these efforts are complementary. And at some point, we think that the liberalization that takes place at the regional level will also come to the WTO and will be multilateralized. Now, there's one point that I have to highlight here is that the rules of RTAs, as such, there is no such binding rules, but there are certain conditions that need to be met. And one condition is transparency, and which is very clear that if you form an RTA, you notify to WTO, and then members will discuss, and I'll come back to this point. But there's one point which is there, and it's also there in some other WTO provisions and not necessarily in this famous GATT Article 24. Those who deal with RTAs, they will be familiar with this provision, is that neutrality vis-a-vis the third parties. So now that we are all discussing this subject, the formation of RCEP, is it going to raise barriers to our trade to these countries? Is it going to divert trade from our countries to the countries that are parties to RCEP? So these are the things that need to be examined. In the WTO, we have a transparency mechanism that was adopted in 2006. We call it transparency mechanism for regional trade agreements. We also have a transparency mechanism for preferential trade agreements. We are talking about here reciprocal trade agreements. But that transparency mechanism, since I do not have my WTO hat, is a very sterile process. So you notify members, discuss in the committee on regional trade agreements, and then we try to see whether this has been consistent or not. But at the end, this process is not a compliance exercise, and so it's basically exchange of information and just a bit of enhanced transparency. So with regard to the implications for RCEP for Bangladesh, and a lot of things has already been said, but I want to also highlight a few points and clarify a few things. One thing is that this is, since the RCEP countries are already trading with the most of the ASEAN countries with a bilateral trade agreement. So the implications for us, to some extent, will depend on how the dynamics are going to evolve with the trade between Japan, China, and Korea. The point, I think the risk of preference erosion will come when we graduate from LDC status. And sir, you have already mentioned that you have also read the vulnerability profile. Let me do some publicity from our side. We also did a trade impacts on LDC graduation study, which we will forward you after this meeting. Here, we have to understand that at this moment, it is not a problem for Bangladesh because our major partners in RCEP countries are basically Japan, China, and Australia. And with all these countries, we have preferential agreements in place. With Japan, we are trading through GSP. With China, we have two options even. We can trade through in the LDC scheme that they have adopted, or we are also parties to APTA, which we can also use to access the Chinese market. And then with Australia, we also have a GSP scheme. But if in 2024, we graduate from LDC status, the LDC GSP duty is withdrawn, then we have to see how we are going to engage with these countries and whether our competitiveness will be eroded because other countries then will have access, duty-free access, and then we have to negotiate a new trading arrangement unless they extend the LDC benefits to us.
Thank you.
So these are the things that I wanted to say now, but that what is happening in the WTO, I will come back when we have the second round. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tawfiq, for very eloquently laying down before us. And I take your point that from the trade perspective, we may not get hurt before 2024, which is 3 years to go only. But we also then lose out the bigger picture. This is not only trade that they are talking about, they're talking about all kinds of things, in terms of economic activities. And it's an economic partnership. Who knows what will emerge out of it? So that's where and also I think it gives little bit of an sort of a space for Bangladesh to play a little bigger than getting out of South Asia, because South Asia seems to be not creating enough opportunity for Bangladesh to play. So why not we look beyond South Asia also, the way other countries have looked at? So that's the other political compulsions that we need to look at. We have come to almost, I've been a very bad manager of timing, but I didn't want to cut short because I think it has been an exciting dialogue, even for someone who has been in the field for quite some time. In terms of learning, I want to invite Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah, if he's still with us. Riaz? Yeah, I see him with the flag behind. Riaz is currently our ambassador in Netherlands. He has been to Sri Lanka, and I would like to just flag that during his time we came very close to signing an FTA with Sri Lanka, and that at the last minute we freaked out. So still it is in the discussion, but that was I think we missed a big opportunity. That would have been the first FTA with Bangladesh. Given the political relation that we had between the two heads of the government at that stage. Riaz has done studies, masters in economics, both from India and Bangladesh, and he has been a Director General Economic Affairs. I think he has always been in the economic affairs as long as I can remember back from his very initial days in the Foreign Office, and he has been my bounce sort of I had a word, but I will not use it, but someone whom I'm always dependent, like Javed, in terms of inputs to the economic affairs, and he's a proponent of FTA and others. So yes, we'd like to see how you see now from Netherlands. They have a much tested RTA, much bigger than that. I'm talking about the European Union project. So how they see the RCEP and how you see the RCEP. Is it something close to that project, or we are struggling? Over to you, yes.
Thank you, sir. First, a rider, and I'll be very cryptic, very fast in the interest of time. Lots of things to flag. I would say flag. First, the rider is that European Union, European Parliament, European Commission has not given any formal response to RCEP. So please, let's all take note of that. I have not come across any national reaction or national response, even in the op-eds across Europe in the English language press. This is very important. So whatever I'm going to say is essentially premised on my interaction with some of the politicians, I would say observers, broadly categorized. So let's take it as that. And they have lots of questions actually in terms of it's very cautious introspection which is going around Europe. Only 3 weeks gone so far, 3 or 4 weeks close to that. And they're watching closely. And I think at this point of time, more overwhelmed by COVID, they're unlikely to open up in sense of reaction. First assessment, my assessment is that they look at RCEP as a political construct. Let's be mindful of that. Secondly, they look at as part, they think that RCEP agreement's impact, which would be coming more, quote unquote, is more geopolitical. Now, I was shared something very fascinating. They said that, look, RCEP is 15 countries, 30% of global GDP, but don't miss out. If you look at CPTPP, which is at the moment 15% of global GDP, but if you add US, United States, it would have been 40%. Very interesting. And they say that if you look at TIPP, meaning Europe and cross-Atlantic, I mean Europe and Asia, United States, that would have been, though it fizzled out for other set of reasons, that would have been 60% of global GDP. And if you look at, for example, European Union and Japan, that's 25% of global GDP. So that means that they're trying to underline to me that don't be too bullish. Second, to European observers, RCEP agreement is not very ambitious. Categorical, they said, on 2 accounts. One is that It avoids services and digital trade. It's very categorical message. I think Dr. Selim Rahan underlined that, but more so. They explained to me that RCEP improves protection of personal data for e-commerce, but don't promote any regional standards for digital technology. Very important distinction. They says RCEP prohibits data localization because the next game to them is not merchandise trade, it's more to be data. And if not just simply services. The data localization, but does not prevent states from mandating disclosure of personal data. Again, a very important distinction. Another interesting thing, I mean, they frankly, they take note of it, but they're not very worried, seems to me, that about the 40% preferential tariff-based kind of opening up within RCEP, intra-RCEP. Other interesting thing, for example, what they feel is that China is actually lowering the threshold and opening it up. But when I asked that, what is your assessment? And they said that perhaps Beijing is looking at focusing investments because they are losing their wage advantage or competitive advantage on lower, value-added production. So that's why they kind of spread it out within RCEP and then try to see that how they can go for more high-valued goods and technological innovation. That's actually where Europe is very, very worried. I'll give an anecdote very quickly. There's a company called ASML. ASML is the company globally which manufactures the machine which produces chips, semiconductor chips. That controls 90%. They are very worried now. That only goes to US, that only goes to Korea. Chinese are begging literally to them because for them to go to the next level, that's what they need. But but that's where actually they're struggled, they can't go. So technology is the rule of the game, frankly. And that's where they're trying to understand that how RCEP is, it's not simply a merchandise trade or certain degree of services. I take note of what Dr. Raihan said earlier about natural persons mobility, but I think much more than that, it's somewhere else. There are a couple of questions during the rounds to which answer it would not be mature right now to look for a definitive answer, and that's something we need to move beyond simply looking at from Bangladesh angle. One is that will RCEP be a future regional economic platform for conversations on artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, digital twins? They would not open up at this moment, but that's what they will be looking at more curiously. So the point about New Zealand, Australia being there and Japan there, you might have to see that how it really pans out. This is certainly China's first bilateral agreement, but the question is that would RCEP eventually accelerate negotiations, for example, between China, Japan, and South Korea? Another thing which one doesn't know. So if one asks us, what would be the takeaways for Europeans, including Brussels? Obviously, we are mindful of Brussels effect. For quite some time, where European single market, they set the bar, they ask others to come in, and they say that you conform to my standards, whether social standards, technical standards, environmental, that's a different thing. Now, with global Britain now also coming out as a kind of competing force vis-a-vis European Union, and now RCEP coming in, and also Britain, for example, London sending some signals to out of desperation, I would be very candidly saying to Beijing, it needs to be seen how really it fizzles, how it kind of shapes up. Point is that one would have to see that for past 10 years, because of that RCEP is coming out, Brussels have been already engaged with bilateral agreements. They have signed bilateral agreements with Korea, Singapore, Japan, Vietnam. They're also in the process of launching negotiations with Australia, New Zealand, and Indonesia. So it's a very guarded kind of way. They knew that RCEP is coming out one way or other. So they already positioned themselves for past 1 year. Very quickly, so what are the things? So one is that the new kind of supply chain, alignments in supply chain that would happen intra-RCEP, how they would kind of look at. Already Europeans are feeling the heat of it because of the Beijing-Hamburg rail connectivity. It's a completely different kind of advantage that China has already gained, not simply cost advantage, the time advantage, the value advantage. So they're trying to see that how they can leverage the climate standards, because it's also about European values, where they value climate change, where they value social standards, Mr. Farooq said. But then here is somewhere where they have completely levelized it. So how would they kind of engage? That's another thing. Towards the final thing, transatlantic cooperation. There is also thinking going in Brussels that, okay, let's extend our hand to Washington. But with Washington, they're really skeptic, even in post-Brexit, post-Trump administration, because initially it got burnt out. Whether it would be exactly even if they reach out, because again there's a bit of clash in terms of the industry interest as also value interest between Brussels and Washington. How that would be easy, that they don't know. But one thing is common, that looking at China, they both think that they need to work together. But when it comes to bricks and mortars, it gets difficult. So in terms of social standard, social protection environment, intellectual property, data transfers, it's going to be a very open question. So I'll rest here. And sir, you'll have to excuse me because I'll have to sign off with that. Thank you, sir. And everyone.
Okay. So thank you very much. I see the uneasiness creeping into the European Union in terms of this mega project, and it's very natural. It's very natural. When you see a rise, with the rise of others, you always get nervous.
Yes, sir. But I must also underline the one-liner, which is that I've consciously stayed away from making any comment as to what you said, Tawfiq said, and others about Bangladesh experience or my experience in 4 years in Sri Lanka. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good. We know that. So you know, in many ways we realize this, and that's why we are here today to talk about it. With this, we come to the first round. I know that we have crossed all the standards of keeping timing, but I think it has been a very interactive session. I will go back to Mr. Ifti Islam, and I left a question with him. I'm today in the asking question mode. What that we should do right now to get into the not only the trade global supply chain, but also the technological supply chain in a layman's words. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we talk about supply chains, let me simplify it because there's a lot of talk of supply chains. So if we manufacture a mobile phone or a television or a car, it's not virtually integrated. It's not that you know all of the parts and all of the circuit boards or the components are all sitting in one country. So there's different products are made in different countries, different components are made in different countries, and there's a supply chain, as the word says in it, and basically you know there's a final assembly. So in the case of say Vietnam, take Vietnam, which is an RCEP member, Vietnam has three Samsung factories, which collectively I think export more than $20 billion. So you know almost more than half of our total RMG exports. And those Samsung factories are importing components from China, from Thailand, from other areas as well, and putting them together. So in terms of RCEP, what is important is to make sure that we have both no tariff barriers when we're importing components into supply chains, and also smooth logistics. So I think that when Bangladesh has a vision or a dream of being a manufacturing technology or otherwise powerhouse, then we have to think about these supply chains. And the reason for these supply chains is because of cost and efficiency. So I think that that's very, very important. One other quick comment on supply chain as well, not to do necessarily with RCEP, but relevant, is we should not be complacent as a country, even in our garments sector, because one of the areas in terms of supply chain, let's say industrial policy more generally, you're seeing emerging from China is actually using artificial intelligence and IoT and fourth industrial revolution technologies to increase the efficiency of their production process and supply chains. So I don't think even for Bangladesh to sit here and say, well, we're exporting garments to the US and Europe, and we can be comfortable with that. I think it's a very dynamic situation, it's not a static situation. So even historic supply chains or historic competitiveness in garments, very low technology product, is likely to change. So yes, I think that we have to be very proactive as a country and not be complacent. And I think I just wanted to, last comment, I wanted to echo, I think one of the things that really jumped out from Barrister Nihat Kabir's comments is that we have to also be self-confident as a country. Rather than talking about overtaking India in per capita GDP, let's see that translated into our industrial policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions in our chat box and in other ways. So I'm going to throw it right now. One question is coming in that India being a partner to the negotiation, why did they pull out at the last minute? So that's one question, and I'll throw it to panelists whoever wants to take it. The other question is coming in that in the post Biden or post Trump era, is Biden likely to change the competitive advantage which Riaz indicated if United States join the CPTPP? Now, second question, and the third question is, Xi Jinping in November in the APEC summit has said that they are favorably disposed to the idea of joining CPTPP as well. So that's something coming out of that level indicates that there is a fundamental rethinking among the major powerhouses in Asia. So how do we see this? Please, anyone who wants to take these three questions. And then we'll go to the closing one, or somebody can wrap it up with the closing as well. Professor Selim.
Thank you. Actually, I had a lot of discussion with my Indian friends, especially when India pulled out of RCEP. And the point I really wanted to make that India shouldn't have done it because India was part of this negotiation from the very beginning. And you rightly pointed out, Ambassador Shahidul Haq, that Indian domestic lobby, actually, they were very much in favor of getting out of the RCEP because they were thinking that RCEP would actually hamper their domestic industry. But that doesn't really fit into the whole liberation, because you know that India over the last 1.5 decades actually made a lot of FTAs with ASEAN, with Japan, with Korea, with Singapore, and they were in the process of making FTA with EU. What I understand that what India had, especially at least a decade back, the kind of mentality among the politicians as well as the economic leaders, I think that there is a change in that mentality. It's more now make in India kind of perspective, what brings out probably more protectionism, and those kind of lobby actually is dominating more. I just want to highlight one particular example. When India declared unilateral decision to give duty-free market access to LDCs, there was a strong domestic lobby which was against it, but Indian political leaders, they took decision that despite that resistance, they will give the duty-free market access. So I did not see that kind of political decision there, or that kind of political stance. So probably that is the reason why India is actually pulled out. About USA and other things, I am hopeful that probably there will be some change, especially with the Biden coming to the power. But again, with China's intention to join TPP, may actually change the whole scenario. So far, the whole we have been used to seeing that two mega trading blocks. One is the USA-led TPP, and another China-led RCEP. So I think how this whole dynamic is going to be changed, with USA again showing the interest to join TPP and China's strong interest to join TPP. So that's actually, we have to wait and see. Thank you. Over to you.
Good. Thank you very much. I think you have answered quite eloquently in terms of the questions that we got. Can I come back to Tawfiq? In terms of the global, if I may even use the word global, trading system currently facing or declining or rising, or I don't know how to describe. So if you share in 2 minutes, so because all trade at the end goes to WTO.
Thank you, sir. And this is the problem that we are discussing. Since at the multilateral front, we are not delivering. So that's why countries are going to bilateral and trying to have deep liberalization. But one point I want to say here is that we have to see the signals coming from these RCEP countries, because it's just been signed. It needs to be ratified. And then at least 6 ASEAN and 3 non-ASEAN parties need to ratify this. It will come into effect probably sometime in 2022. And then we'll see how the progression of this arrangement goes, and then how the dynamics evolve. In the WTO, actually, the multilateral trading system, as I said, RTAs and multilateral trading system coexist, and it is something that will continue. The value of the system will remain because there are certain issues which will never be dealt with at bilateral or regional level, like subsidies. So for certain issues, you need multilateral approach and multilateral cooperation, and the value of the system will remain. Overall, the objective of WTO is to facilitate a free flow of goods and services. But then we want to do this under stable and predictable conditions. So that's the basic aim of WTO. And it rests on 3 pillars. So one pillar is negotiation. The second pillar is the administration of these negotiated results. And then the third pillar is dispute settlement. But what is happening at this moment, and which is also an unprecedented moment, that we are having crisis in each of these pillars, and this is something, the crisis of every institution is unique, and all 3 pillars are not delivering. In negotiations, we are stuck because there is a shifting power balance, and then the United States and then China, they are engaged in a way that we have to address the problem of differentiation. The WTO of 1995 is not the same of WTO in 2021. So how can we now move ahead with the new reality? And there is something happening, because WTO of the future will also depend on how you are going to have control over the products that are being developed. With so much technology is advancing, so this is something that we have to deal with. The situation with the dispute settlement is also very unique because we do not have an appellate body. So in the Bangladesh context, you have a high court, but then you do not have a Supreme Court. So which means that if you do not have that kind of a framework, the efficacy of the WTO operations becomes like less effective in terms of enforcing agreements. And then what is happening in all these areas under this fashionable word of reforms, because that's the kind of thing you talk, whatever you bring in the WTO, you say that we need reform. And it is true that every organization, in order for the institution or the organization to be relevant or to remain agile, you have to embrace reforms. This is something is not happening in the WTO. WTO is like a very big truck. It's not a Formula racing car. Negotiations are very slow, but then things develop elsewhere. And then in that process, you kind of, you get undermined. But I think at the end, it is a place, as you said in the beginning, sir, that the United States is not currently engaged. Hopefully with the leadership change, they might bring WTO, there might be a new impetus. They have not yet abandoned the WTO. They have withdrawn from some other organizations, but they are still, they still value the system. And I think for the world trading system as a whole, you need to monitor agreements. You need to provide a forum for them to continue to negotiate. Certain issues will always come at the multilateral level. And I think we have to see how with the new political environment from next year and after this COVID pandemic, how we are going to approach these issues in the WTO. But it very much is there. One final point I want to say, and again, it is in the Bangladesh context, because whether WTO will be there or not, the increasing trend towards reciprocal agreements, which is something that Bangladesh will have to factor in future negotiations. In the past, we used to get preferences through non-reciprocal agreements. So it was unilateral. But in order to secure the same benefits in future, you have to now engage in reciprocal type of arrangement. And this is the world trend. And when you talk of this FTA kind of a framework, it cuts across broad areas of economic life. You know, your procurement rules will come into scrutiny, your intellectual property will come into scrutiny. And I think Professor Selim Raihan, Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah, and other speakers have said that we have to really do our homework and prepare for the 21st century kind of trade agreements. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your this whole reciprocal arrangement versus unilateral arrangement, and I think we have to start getting prepared for a post-LDC time when we have to really compete rather than only looking for the professional treatment issue. At this stage, can I come back? And I said I will to Professor Goswami if he has sort of a concluding thoughts and shares based on the discussion something with us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I think the way RCEP is moving, and I had the chance to go through some of the documents, and I found that it is going to be another European Union if other things remain same. If that is so, then we have some challenges, no doubt, because we have our customs duty dependence, and most of our imports, RCP countries have import relationship with us. So in that context, we have some worries in terms of losing customs revenue, but this can be made up. If the RCEP may turn into a European Union kind of factor mobility based integration in future, then I won't be surprised. In that case, I think we should avail that opportunity, and we should also stay with our existing South Asian integration, because that is also helpful for us, because in international integration politics, it is not a either or kind of situation. So it's a win-win situation. So you can be a member of 2, 3, or 4 different integration schemes, because all of them are regionally discriminatory. In that sense, so if RCEP is turning into a common external tariff kind of customs union in future, then Bangladesh have many things to gain. And other than trade, and from other discussions from other experts, it has been evident that it's not just trading channel. There will be a lot of immigration type of issues, investment kind of issues, FDI kind of issues, and Bangladesh have lot of things to offer in RCP arrangement. And I think we should not ignore ASEAN. ASEAN will be a fact, and we should not ignore China. China is a fact of international economic order. So that's why, keeping this in mind, we should do a lot of research, and there are a lot of research can be done in universities also, because there are strong modeling that can be done in examining the cost and benefit of this kind of integration using gravity framework and other kind of general equilibrium framework. We should do some research and see what are the key benefits that Bangladesh can get. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Javed, are you convinced enough that Bangladesh should very seriously start looking at pros and cons, as Professor Goswami has rightly pointed out? And even, we often deal with unknown and unknowable, so certain things we cannot know right now what will happen. But at least do little bit of it, and proactively sort of reach out to them rather than waiting for a call. Over to you, Javed.
Sir, thank you so much. Of course, I can't agree more with you and with Dr. Goswami. Sir, honestly, the earlier the better, and not waiting for any call. It has to be proactive. And the webinar that Barrister Nihat Kobi mentioned, in fact, our division organized that, connecting all our ASEAN ambassadors. Our ambassadors based in the ASEAN capitals and all the chambers immediately after this RCEP agreement. And there was a consensus about a proactive trade policy. And I had a reaction from one faculty member from New Zealand. He said that generally for signing an FTA, what usually is done by our policy makers, by our system, is that we do a sort of assessment by our tariff commission. And he suggests that it can be more proactive if we can do a lot of more joint studies. with the partner countries, because in many instances I'm not talking from my official position, I'm just quoting that academic. He says that if we have a study and that has a biased analysis, then it is less dependable. So in that case, we need to be really checking all these frontiers. So how to go ahead with that? So when this RCEP process started, apparently we were a little bit off guard in the sense that we were not that prepared about tariff concession, mandatory adherence to IPR, multifarious standards and regulations. So now as things have evolved, trade is more of quid pro quo. It is more of transactional than concessionary. Now we have to accept that reality. And in fact, we have accepted that fact that now Bangladesh has reached a stance. Now it is within the club of 40. And the other day we had a discussion among ourselves, the senior officials at the ministry. We are probably, Professor Selim Rehan can correct me if I am wrong, the only economy in the club of global 40, the top 40, that doesn't have an FTA. That's a striking reality. So how is that possible? We need to really do a little bit of serious exercise among ourselves.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Javed.
For that, sir, just one submission
Okay.
from us. That is, we have to actuate whatever resources we have, and for that, we think that SAFTA and BIMSTEC FTA can be within our parameter. So we need to really actuate whatever we have within our region. One speaker has mentioned about the cultural eccentricities between Southeast Asia, East Asia, and South Asia. We have to accept that. So we need to really mobilize our regional resources and define our position. And we also foresee that at a time, BIMSTEC ASEAN FTA also may be a possibility. I was going through some of the op-eds that are carried by some of our newspapers or business pages. So it may be a possibility someday also, BIMSTEC ASEAN FTA. So in that case, we can define a role in the near future. So for that, of course, sir, my last point would be, we need to be a little bit aggressive. There is no doubt about that. So the next generation of trade negotiators will be able to cope up with the challenges. And as have been pointed out by a number of panelists, the trade negotiation of 21st century. And in that respect, North-South University is also rendering a wonderful service to enhance to the capacity building in the trade process of Bangladesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
thank you, sir, for
Javed.
inviting me.
I don't know whether you have looked at one of the things that we did together, all ministries included, in 2014. We spent a day looking at FTA, and we had the academicians also certified the Foreign Office, and then out of that we had a note for 2-3 pages. Riaz was DG's mid South, mid MEA, and we all decided.
Yes, sir.
Whole thing, but only in the midst of that we have lost 4 years at least, if not more. And the other thing is, it's also for others. The courage is a part of a character trait of a diplomat. Having the courage of exploring frontiers. If you don't do it, then you actually do disservice to your nation. So you have to have a courage, at which Barrister Nahid, we suggested, the bold step towards future. It will never be easy. You have to create your path. No one else will create path for you. So the courage, that's important. And I'm glad that you brought that down, the boldness thing. And I'm sure that it has to be a collective courage. I see that Farooq Bhai is still with us. Farooq Bhai, Any concluding thought? I know we have already crossed the limit, but before I give the floor to our distinguished chair, would you like to have the concluding thoughts?
Thank you, sir. I just would like to make one comment, and also would ask your comment, because you had a golden experience of working with the government for long decades. So my observation, working in the private sector for about almost 2 decades, our politicians, with all my respect to them, they focus more on domestic politics. I haven't felt, at least working very closely with some of the ministers while dealing with the global issues in terms of trade and labor politics, I haven't found them to be really very keen, rather sustainably keen on monitoring the global issues and global development, global politics, global trade. And of course, the diplomats do it, but then there lies a gap that I have felt as a private sector representative. It's my honest confession to you, sir, and also would like to know your view, because you are just only a year maybe that you left the public sector, so you are still fresh in your memory. So what do you think? Is my observation correct, sir? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought that I am only supposed to be asking questions, not answering today. But I will try and respond. You know, I think the important thing is that you know, my own experience suggests that we have a prime minister. I'm talking about the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who I think is very open, flexible, and progressive, whether it comes to trade, humanitarian issue, or bilateral context. So that's a big advantage if you have that kind of a leadership. And you know, here I'm not sort of saying which is not true. I have my own experience, and she is willing to take a courageous and bold step to bring in values for Bangladesh. You know, broad concept. So where is again? It is the civil servants who have to give to the political masters options. There, I think we have difficulties. I'll be very frank, especially on this area, and why, and you know, and I know. So time has come, whether we can change it or not, and this is one of the objectives for our things, and there will be a policy paper out of it. So if the civil servants, after a consultation, can give something to the Honorable Prime Minister and say that, look, this will be a little painful for Bangladesh in initial stage, but perhaps it will bring an open windows of our of collaborations, of our benefits, or you know, out of the whole process. I think she will take the right, courageous, and bold decisions. So that's where it matters. So that is the reason that we thought of exercising, having an exercise. I have also been talking to the Ministry of Commerce and Tariff Commission and others. I think they often need to open up and think in long term. I was talking to Ifti Islam today, and he also said that you have to look at the bigger picture. You know, and time has come when Bangladesh should beyond South Asia. You know, if not the world, at least let's look at Asia. If you continue to bog down in South Asian politics, then you can never be, as Javed has said, a member of Club of 40 or Club of 30 sooner. So that's where I think, yeah, my question will be anchored. I think there are more discussions in the civil society, more discussions in the business community. The civil servants have to wake up. That's my call. With this, I think we all have spoken. I also understand that we have been almost 2.5 hours sitting and talking on a subject which is not very juicy. You know, let me put it in this way. It's a hard issue. It's a hard issue. But thank you very much, those who are with us asking questions, especially the panelists. With this, I'll hand it over to our distinguished chair, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Atikul Islam. You have the floor, sir, and you can conclude.
Thank you, Ambassador Shahidul Haq. Let me first apologize. I had to go to a janaza thing. One of our members of the Board of Trustees died today. I was late in coming back home, so I had to join you a bit late. I am not a knowledgeable person in what you have talked about. Basically, by training, I'm a bean counter. I'm an accountant. So my perspective is very narrow. Anyway, every time I come to a webinar organized by Sheikh Tawfiq and Mr. Shahidul Haq, I really enjoy it because I learn a lot. Let me start with the North-South University, our interest in it. North-South University is basically engaged in producing ethical leaders. Some of our products go to industry, government, and other areas, and they rise up to leadership positions pretty fast. Others start their own business, entrepreneurs. Our research is mainly aimed at making a difference. Let me clarify it. Our research is applied research. Our research is the kind of research that informs policy making. The whole aim is there. So in that regard, these kind of webinars, seminars, workshops, we emphasize them very much. We do not look at the role of a university is to simply follow a syllabus and produce some graduates who will be able to man some offices. No. We see our role as an enlightened, civilized, advanced educational research institution that has a global attitude. And obviously, that includes how do we relate to the globe, how do we relate to the world. Coming to this question of RTAs and FTAs, look, I think there are different objectives for different types of international trading blocks or unions of different sorts. WTO provides the basic infrastructure. If there is conflict, where do you go? You go to WTO for settlement. WTO is like a government, a world government in certain ways. You go to the European Union. The objective there is not just to promote trade. It was just to promote trade if you go back when it was the ECM, European Common Market. And then when it became EU, it started regulating all aspects of life. If you have patience with me, I'll give you one example. Once I was passing through, I think I was traveling to New York via London. I stopped for only a couple of days and I was reading the newspaper. And there was a cartoon. Basically, it shows a mother served the food on the table to her 8-year-old. And then there was this EU inspector who was just standing behind the boy, just like that. And he said, my client refuses to eat the greens. Basically, children's right. That little boy refuses to eat the vegetables. My client refuses to eat the greens. So EU was very much a regulatory body. It would say how many decibel noise you could produce in your lawn mowers when you're mowing your lawn. So there's that kind. They started as an economic bloc, trading bloc, then common tariff bloc. Then they went further to say, okay, we want to protect or promote the European thoughts. It became a cultural sort of a club then. That is it, not total cultural club. That aspect got added to it. Democratic governments, human rights, environment, etc., etc. All these things, labor rights, all these things came in. Basically, I think every species wants to promote its own survival or want to ensure its own survival. Every civilization wants to prolong or linger its type of thinking and culture. And that's what's been happening in the, whether you talk about the WTO or you talk about the European Union. England found it a bit hard, not for economic reasons, but for cultural reasons. I dare to say they left or they're about to leave the Union, Brexit. I think the European Union is having a bit of trouble with people like Viktor Orban and the sort of culture they want to bring in. So as you evolve, you go to that stage where those fine things become very important. Then with the exit of the United States, or at least, its disinterest in WTO or its lack of support for WTO during Trump times, the world trading system has, what should I say, has been some of the administration of it has been somewhat weakened. And there has been an opportunity for China to create its own bloc, its sphere of influence, and they know what their market is. So in this new RCEP, you won't find much talk about child labor. You won't find much talk about human rights, this, that, and that thing. They will concentrate mainly on economic things, the basic bloc. Let us get some countries in and let us lead it. And India, maybe for some political or some other reasons, is staying away from it. So economics and politics and culture cannot be totally, what should I say, isolated and treated differently. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, we should be a part of the RCEP. The ASEAN is there, Australia, New Zealand is there. China, of course, is the basic, foundation block. You have Japan and Korea, countries like that. We must be there, and we have some friends there already. There are a number of countries, I don't have to name them. They're very friendly to Bangladesh. They would like to give a helping hand to Bangladesh. So we should be in there. It may not be that important, but it does, it comprises an area where growth is the highest in the world now, and it's likely to continue on. About 30% of the world's population. Without population, you don't get demand. With about 28% of the world's GDP, is in this area. And what do we stand to lose? We can only gain out of it. Therefore, for Bangladesh, nothing to lose. We can only gain. We can only gain international profile, regional profile. I cannot see any negatives in there. So I hope that you people who are the experts produce a little policy draft and give it to the relevant departments, authorities. Let them read it. It may even subconsciously influence their decision. And if that happens, I'll be very happy that we met under the auspices of North-South University and we discussed these things. Thank you so much.
Tawfiq bhai.
Joy.
Yeah, I think, thank you, sir, for your very comprehensive perspective of the discussion. With that, we are at the end, and I thank again all the panelists and participants for having also patience and very, very lively, interesting discussion. We continued almost like 2 hours, 35 minutes. And as promised, as our Vice Chancellor was saying, we always prepare a policy brief on the basis of discussion. We do not do discussion on the sake of discussion only. So we will prepare a policy document and also a kind of a publication out of it. We share it with all the panelists to get their views, whether we have rightly has reflected their views there, and then we will publish it and disseminate it to the relevant stakeholders, including the government policy makers. So with that note, I thank again, and we are concluding this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.